Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Jeremy.
And on behalf of all of us at the Center for Holy Land Studies, we would like to wish you a very joyous Christmas season. Normally around this time of year, we take some time to look at the birth narrative text of the Gospels.
From this, we wanted to take some time and shed some light on some of the aspects of the narrative that sometimes we might not fully understand, yet are integral for us to understand in studying God's Word. With that being said, we thought it would be very important to look at one of the more commonly misunderstood portions of the Christmas story, the journey of the wise men.
It is true that in our culture today, a nativity is not complete without the wise men. But the question we have to stop and ask is, who were the wise men?
You know, it's a great question to ask. When we look at the Gospel of Matthew in its original Greek, we find that the wise men are never referenced by that title. Instead, Matthew calls them by the proper name of Magi. Matthew gives us a little insight into who they were through his description of them, stating that they were from the East and that they were in some way involved with divination through astronomy. As a matter of fact, the term Magi is the same word that's used to describe in the book of Acts both the magician Simon and Bar-Jesus. Yet historically, this description that we find in the Gospels and Acts is just the tip of the iceberg.
One of the earliest in-depth descriptions of the Magi comes from the works of the Greek historian Herodotus, who roughly 400 years before the events of the first Christmas travels to the lands of Persia and encounters them. The Magi serves as a priestly caste system for the Persian and Parthian empires. Herodotus describes them as incredible dream interpreters and astronomers, but also very pagan, sacrificing men in order to rid themselves of what they believed were bad omens or to gain favorable ones from the gods. They were highly respected by the people, and often their words, visions, and interpretations were treated with the utmost respect throughout the pagan lands. Often when we talk about the Magi and the Christmas story with groups in the land of Israel, we are asked the question, why are they often referred to as kings, and why do we always see three?
Interestingly enough, these understandings of the Magi simply come from later church traditions and are in no way reflective of the text of Matthew's Gospel.
The identification of the Magi as kings is linked to Old Testament prophecies that describe the Messiah being worshipped by kings in Isaiah 60, Psalm 68, and Psalm 72, which reads, "All kings shall fall down before him, all nations will serve him."
Early readers reinterpreted Matthew in the light of these prophecies and then went on to elevate the Magi to the position of kings. By AD 500, the majority of the church had adopted this tradition as the idea for those journeying from the East.
Historically, though, the position of the Magi was not far removed from the power of the throne. Greek and Roman historians record that in Eastern cultures, when it was time to coronate a new king, this action was to be the undertaking of the Magi. Notice how upon their arrival in Jerusalem, these men were admitted to the high court of King Herod himself, and their question of the birth of the Messiah was answered by the highest doctrinal authority in the land. This stands as a testament to the power and authority that these pagan Magi commanded, even within the land of Israel. Imagine the mindset of Herod the Great, an Idumean king, over a kingdom of Jewish people who strongly disliked him, and suddenly these Parthian kingmakers enter his presence with the intent to honor a new king. Herod's reaction begins to make more sense.
The idea of three Magi, though, is birthed out of the correlation associated with the amount of gifts mentioned in Matthew's Gospel: gold, incense, and myrrh. However, this in no way solidifies that there were just three of them. Some of the earliest traditions and writings and iconography of the Eastern Orthodox Church hold to a tradition of 12 Magi, as well as all their attendants that came with them.
The larger number of travelers, as well as the distance in which they had to travel, falls more in line with the understanding that these Magi were not at the birth of Jesus as our traditional nativity scene displays, but instead appeared on the scene up to 2 years later, forcing the hand of King Herod to kill all the young boys in Bethlehem under the age of 2 in Matthew 2, verse 16. Such a journey would take finances, planning, and preparation, and could not simply be undertaken on a whim. The background information helps us to unpack the biblical account of what we see in Matthew.
Oftentimes, we try to think that God's plan is to work in the ways that we might work. However, rarely is that the case. We often would think that the first ones that would be at Jesus' birth would be the most influential people in the land of Israel. Yet God clearly does the opposite. Instead, he chooses to reveal himself to those outside the sphere of what we would see as normal, pagan magicians. Why?
The beauty of this story is realizing that God knows the intent of the hearts of all men. He knows those who will follow him and those who will harden their hearts. It becomes evident that these Magi were undoubtedly not only open to what God was doing through the course of humanity, but also actively searching for it and willing to submit to it when it was found. The first century Roman historian Suetonius describes that the entire Roman Empire and beyond was quite aware of the ancient prophecies that the ruler of the world would come from Judea. However, Rome would claim that this prophecy would come to mean Emperor Vespasian or Titus. Matthew was intentional about involving these non-Jewish pagans in his narrative as among some of the first people to identify Jesus as the Son of God and worship him.
The author of Matthew found a way of providing a background for the promise that Christ is for all people and all nations, no matter where they are in life, as long as they are willing to submit and come and worship him. The Apostle Jude reflects this in John chapter 14 when he asks Jesus, "Why have you revealed yourself to us and not to the world?" The truth is that God had started revealing himself from the very beginning of Jesus' life.
Once again, from all of us here at the Center for Holy Land Studies, Merry Christmas and peace on earth to men in whom God is pleased.